The College Football Show on a Wednesday. Appreciate you stopping by here at the Voice of College Football. My name is Mark Rogers, and lock it in here during the off season. We are going to run through ACC TV ratings. This show is all about the news of the day, which we have found none. So if you've got anything there in the chat, let us know about any news of the day that we should cover. We, of course, attacked the SEC Big Ten situation in taking over the college football playoff the other day, and some coaching changes that we've addressed over the last few days. But again, we are here every day. First and foremost, news of the day, a big topic, which this week will be TV ratings. We knocked out the Big 12 on Tuesday, and the ACC is up today. We go with the SEC on Thursday and the Big Ten on Friday, and wrap it all up and let you know some perspective on these TV ratings. So again, we appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. So this is about, again, the news of the day, big topic of the day. We will have some exceptional guests, as we always do here at the Voice of College Football. Most of those will show up after we get through March Madness, and a lot of our contacts can focus on football. And then we will take at least one call from you. Keep in mind that you can kick this thing into overtime with the $100 bonus through the Super Chats, Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, which are actually the best ways to contribute here at the Voice of College Football. Again, Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App, those links are down in the description section down below. So we're just not showing up today. It's Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern time. So for many of you, you're just catching on to this, just catching up with us. But we have made a commitment to this particular time slot that may need to move from time to time. But say this is day number 6. And here we are, 4 p.m. Eastern time. Disputed National Champions is the book. It's a good read. I need to bring on the endorsements and copy and paste all those great comments that we've received about this book, because you hear it from me, but you need to hear it from the people that have read and reviewed the book. And we so much appreciate everyone who has read the book and left some exceptional comments. And if you've left the comments here on the YouTube channel, please go to Amazon and leave your comments on this book. That greatly helps the launch of the book. Disputed National Champions, and it's just a $10 purchase for you. And it's all sorts of college football fun going through the 1990s and the future. Speaking of which, we were on the line on Tuesday with Steve Dace, Michigan Podcast, and I always enjoy mixing it up with Steve on Michigan Podcast, but in particular, although I always have a good time, always challenged with the discussion, it was even more fun on Tuesday. Maybe the most fun I've had on the Michigan Podcast. We just had a great time mixing up Ohio State, Michigan, the rivalry, and the ins and outs. Speaking of which, if you've not watched the All Everything program debate show that we had, Ohio State, Michigan edition, on Monday night, please check it out. I know a lot of promotions to get through, but we will do one more, and that is coming up next Monday. So this past Monday, catch up with the All Everything Ohio State Michigan debate show that we did on this past Monday. If you've yet to see it or missed any of it, it was a great time. This coming Monday is the State of the Voice of College Football. What is that? You've heard of the State of the Union address. The State of the Voice of College Football address. Sometimes these last 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours, however long it takes for me to say everything that I want to communicate about the Voice of College Football and our network, our burgeoning network. So consider that when it was pretty much a one-man show, I used to talk for 5 or 6 hours. Now we've got like 30 or 40 people involved. So I may talk a lot longer than that. We're going to hear from many of them, and we will take all your comments and questions and suggestions. But just understand, when you show up next Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern time, it's not going to be about voice. It's not going to be about college football. It will be about the voice of college football. All right. And again, this is because of you. This all is because of you. So we want to hear from you first and foremost about ideas, suggestions about what we do here at the Voice of College Football. All right. Want to see who's in the chat. Then we will move on to ACC TV ratings. David, thank you for showing up. Appreciate you. Karen's here. Very nice to see Karen, of course. Todd, thank you so much. Hello, Mark, and everyone. Jackson, setting things up very well. Karen can tell you about the book. I believe David's got a book. I believe. But nice endorsements, and thank you so much to all those people that have purchased the book. And with Keith going for 5 in a row. Good one, David. Quote of the day. Besides the person who left, I should probably do this more often. After I'm on Michigan podcast, I should go back and look at the comments that people are leaving. I have to admit, and I've been humbled by the times that I have looked. I've been surprised by the pro-Michigan audience that has been very largely, usually, mostly kind to me. But somebody made some kind of stupid comment about, I can't even think of the name of the product that Ryan Day gets accused of using, which his hair is pretty jet black. His beard is pretty jet black. So I'm not making a judgment call on it, but it was funny. I was accused of that. No, it's all that, that's gel in there, but it's all natural. That's the hair color. I'll take it. Hey, there is gray in there. Believe me, it may not look like it, but there is gray in there. So we have not touched that stuff. I get accused of that from time to time, but it's not happened. All right, maybe I'll have to wash my hair on camera. Maybe we'll have to do that someday. This has probably happened maybe 15 times that I've been accused of that. So I'm going to have to wash my hair on camera. I'm sure that would be scintillating live streaming right there. Oh, Troy, come on. No better than that. It's my airing of grievances. Is that what it is? That's Troy's memory of last year's or any year's Voice of College Football State of the Union address. It's my airing of grievances. Wow. Well, I hope it's not. Karen's got 2 copies. All right, then. And yes, Jackson, thanks for reminding me that we also were on college football with Sam this week. That was a great discussion. Appreciate Sam reaching out to have me on his show. Maybe I'll just start making guest appearances all over the place. I need some water before we talk ACC ratings, that's for sure. I even took attention to the set and put as many ACC helmets on the set as possible. How about that? We've got Clemson, North Carolina, and others, Florida State, Miami, Stanford in the ACC. All right, let's get to these TV ratings in the ACC. And yes, once again, the reminder on Monday is that I'm going to be airing my grievances to all of you. Man, I'm going to have to watch it on Monday, huh? All right. Here we go. I should have my glasses standing by somewhere. Yes. Week 1 and week 0. Let's pick out the ACC. So this is all about the ACC. And yes, you're going to see a post most likely tomorrow morning that is going to read very much like this live stream. It's going to be about ACC TV ratings, but we slice it down, we edit it, we cut out the dead spots, the beginning and the end, and therefore we can present the ACC TV ratings video, which in week 0 and week 1, if you recall, Florida State and Georgia Tech got together and had a 5 million view audience, which Mike Norvell is not too happy to have presented his football team in the beginning of the catastrophe that was Florida State football this past year. That was the fifth rated game of week 0 and 1, although there was a big advantage there in which FSU and Georgia Tech were not competing against anyone. Largely, most of these games were not competed against, like USC and LSU. Yes, it got a huge number, but consider nobody else was playing on Sunday night to compete against that game. So again, locking in on the ACC, we've got the numbers 3, 4, and 5 games of the week with Clemson involved against Georgia at 7.5 million views on ABC. Miami and Florida played part of that triple header to 6.5 million folks, roughly. So we see Clemson, Georgia, noon on ABC. What does this tell us? Something, maybe, that 1.2 million people less watched a more competitive football game after watching Georgia shellac Clemson 31-3. 1.2 million people less on the same network, next time slot, which may be a better time slot, that could be argued, Miami and Florida. Still a nice number at 6.3 million. The next weekend, Florida State. Florida State has locked down prime time in week 0 and week 1 in recent years. They've had games against Alabama, Notre Dame, here against Boston College, Virginia Tech, and others. Of course, back-to-back years against LSU. So that's a good marketing ploy by Florida State and the ACC. However, it doesn't work out too well when you look completely atrocious. On this Monday night, it was Boston College and Florida State at 4.44 million. And elsewhere in the ACC, there was a Thursday night game, North Carolina, Minnesota on Fox, 1.8 million, which was trounced by the Colorado game against North Dakota State. So that was all about Deion Sanders drawing a crowd, because Colorado and North Dakota State would not outdraw North Carolina and Minnesota normally. And then Stanford, new to the ACC, taking on TCU on a Friday night on ESPN, got 1.5 million views. Virginia Tech and Vandy turned out to be a really good game, and an upset for Vandy drew just under 1.5 million on ESPN at noon. And I believe that is it for the ACC. I believe. No, we got Pitt taking on Kent State. 82,000 people decided to check that out. An average of 82,000. So more than 82,000 people actually checked out Pitt at Kent State at some point, but that was the average viewership on ESPNU. Let's go to week 2. There's week 2. And the ACC chimes in with the number 4 game. NC State, Tennessee. The Wolfpack got shellacked by 41 points. Just under 3 million people watched that game on ABC. Then we have to go down quite a bit to find the next ACC team that shows up. That's Cal and Auburn on ESPN2. Just over 1 million people watched it. And I'm sure Cal brought about 10% of that crowd. We also have, new to the ACC, of course, this past year, SMU almost won the conference. Just under 1 million people watched SMU and BYU, which turned out to be one of the most talked about games of the year because of the playoff implications. That was on a Friday night. 917,000 people watched it. Duke and Northwestern got together on FS1, 514,000 average viewership. Virginia Wake on ESPN2 at 358K. Pitt Cincinnati at 304 on ESPN2. And that is it for week 2 in the ACC. And again, we're going to summarize this a little bit better for the clip that's going to be released on Thursday morning. Week 3 in the ACC TV ratings. Nobody in the 1 position, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Where does the ACC show up? When they do, they show up against Memphis. Florida State, Memphis, noon game on ESPN, 1.59 million. A lot of these TV ratings not delivering well for the ACC here when you consider no ACC teams in the top 8 games. Then it's Florida State against Memphis, which is a far cry, of course, from Georgia, Kentucky, and Alabama, Wisconsin. Elsewhere in the ACC, West Virginia and Pitt. Now, this shows you the power of the network and the time slot. West Virginia and Pitt played the year before on a Thursday night opening weekend on ESPN on a Thursday night with only one game in competition. And over 3.5 million people watched that game. 1 year later, West Virginia and Pitt played another game down to the wire, 1.1 million, a third of the audience, because it was ESPN2. And there was competition at 3:30 in the afternoon. Other games coming from the ACC in week 2 involve Cal and San Diego State on ESPN, just under 1,938,000. And that's about what an ESPN game usually gets in the late window. Then on Saturday, we've got Ole Miss and Wake, 419,000 on CW. And that is it for week 3. On to week 4 in the ACC. Nobody in the top 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 positions. The top rated ACC game, NC State and Clemson, just under 2 million on ABC. What this is starting to show me, since we did the Big 12 on Tuesday, is that the difference between the ACC and the Big 12 is Deion Sanders. Colorado drew crowds of plus 6 million, plus 4 million 4 times, regularly in the 3.5 million range. And we're seeing even Clemson, NC State at under 2 million. Elsewhere from the ACC, Stanford, Syracuse. That was a Friday night game. That was a very entertaining game where Stanford got a walk-off field goal due to Fran Brown's incompetence. 1.37 million on ESPN. Miami and South Florida. That was a Saturday night game on ESPN at 1.25 million. And I'm sure ESPN was not real pleased to schedule Miami and South Florida on a Saturday night, because the Saturday night games on ESPN do way more than 1.2 million typically. Cal, Florida State, ESPN2, 887,000. Georgia Tech, Louisville. That was a good ball game on ESPN2, 782,000. And on down the list, SMU brought in a paltry 322,000 along with TCU on the CW. And that appears to be it for the ACC. No. Duke and Middle Tennessee. I'm sure you all were captivated by this one. Duke and Middle Tennessee, 53,000 average viewership on ESPNU for a 3:30 kick. Week 5. Where's the ACC going to show up? Number 1. Where is the number 1 ACC game? It was the 6th rated game of the week. Virginia Tech and Miami, the one that went down to the wire. Virginia Tech threw the Hail Mary that almost was called a touchdown and was not. And they went to replay. 3.26 million for a Friday night on ESPN. Next up, Stanford, Clemson, blowout. Exactly 1 million people. Exactly 1 million people. Average viewership for that one on ESPN. We have Duke in North Carolina, not basketball, football, 521,000 on ESPN2. NC State against NIU, 427,000 on the CW. Next up from the ACC, anybody else? No one else. On to week 6. Will the ACC have one ratings win during this season? I have to think not. Clemson, Florida State, Miami, Florida State would be the two shots, the two most obvious shots. Those aren't going to come close. So again, we got to go down the list to find the ACC. They are not in the top 6, 7. There they are. Miami and Cal. That was a late night game on ESPN. Went down to the wire. Miami pulled it out. They were down 35-10. 1.29 million, 1.92 million watched it on ESPN. There's the Clemson-Florida State game, which was one of the worst Clemson-Florida State games in recent memory. Florida State, of course, at this point had proven to be awful. 1.4 million on ESPN on a Saturday night. That was a Saturday night primetime ESPN game. 1.4 million. SMU Louisville. They played at noon. That was a good ball game. 1.4 million ESPN. Syracuse, UNLV. That was a Friday night game on FS1. That was a good ball game. 44-41 overtime game. 698,000 watched it. Pitt, North Carolina, ESPN2, 645K. Wake, NC State. That reeks of CW, 446. And that's it for the ACC in week 6. In week 7, topped by Ohio State, Oregon at 9.6 million. Where's the ACC show up? 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The 11th rated game of the week is the top ACC game. Only 1.3 million people watch Clemson and Wake Forest. Noon ESPN. Next up, Cal and Pitt, 741 ESPN. Georgia Tech and North Carolina on the CW, 541,000. Anyone else from the ACC? No, we move on to week 8. Where's the ACC going to show up? The third rated game of the week. This would be the ACC's best showing. And this may turn out to be the highest rated game for the ACC all season, which is a bad showing because they should have a game show up at 5 million. They did last year when Florida State was good. Miami and Louisville, the third highest rated game of the week, 4.07 million on ABC. Next up, Georgia Tech in a game against Notre Dame at 1.59 million on ESPN. Florida State and Duke at 1.26 million. Boston College, Virginia Tech. That was a Thursday night game on ESPN at 712,000. And that is it for the ACC. Week 8. Week 9, topped by Ohio State, Nebraska. The ACC shows up at the 14th rated game of the week. So think about that. There's about 35 games that get rated every week. And in this particular week, the SEC, the Big Ten, and the Big 12 as well, comprise the 13 highest rated games of the week. The ACC doesn't show up until number 14. Florida State, Miami, 1.5 million. That's a prime time game on ESPN. So this game did not get buried in any way. Spectrum, we don't need you on the screen. Syracuse and Pitt. That was the Kyle McCord 5-pick game on a Thursday night, 948,000 on ESPN, followed closely by Louisville Boston College, 879. Elsewhere, North Carolina, Virginia, that was a noon game on the CW at 398,000. Cal shows up against Oregon State, 183,000 people watching that game on Saturday afternoon on ESPN2. That's a lousy number. On to week 9. On to week 10. Topped by Ohio State, Penn State at 9.77 million. And where does the ACC show up? Game number 5 with Duke and Miami. I watched that game, 1.96 million on ABC. Clemson, Louisville. That was a primetime game on ESPN at 1.4 million. Elsewhere in the ACC, anybody. Is that it for the entire conference for week 10? Duke, Miami, Louisville, Clemson. That's it. So everyone had a bye week, and then there was probably a triple header on the ACC network, which do not show up. Unfortunately, we do not have SEC network and ACC network numbers. Week 11, topped by Bama, LSU, and Georgia Ole Miss. So the SEC dominated the airwaves in week 11. And the ACC shows up with its best showing. Miami, Georgia Tech, 3.46 million. That's a noon game on ESPN. And then after that, Clemson, Virginia Tech, that was a 3:30 game on ESPN at 1.44 million. So there's a direct comparison to a certain extent there. Miami and Georgia Tech play on ESPN, 3.5 million people watch it. Then the next game's Clemson, Virginia Tech. Pretty similar brands. Comparing Clemson, Miami, and Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech, and 2 million less people watch that game. Then after that, that is it for the ACC. For one thing, again, these ACC network triple headers are carving into the listings here. Tennessee, Georgia, just under 10 million folks watched it on average. The ACC comes in with Virginia against Notre Dame, under 2 million on NBC. Clemson, Pitt, 1.85 million, ESPN noon game. Boston College and SMU, 957,000 on ESPN, Saturday at 3:30 Eastern. Syracuse and Cal, that was on the CW, 298. And that's it for the ACC in week 12. Week 13, topped by Ohio State, Indiana. And the ACC finally shows up at number... Where? Number 13? Wake Forest and Miami. Not even 1 million people. Wow. NC State, Georgia Tech at 897,000 on ESPN. SMU, Virginia, 262. Ouch. That was a blowout, too. Just an awful game. Pitt, Louisville, 240,000 people on ESPN2. That's a terrible showing for ESPN2. And on to the final regular season week. And of course, on this particular weekend, a lot of Thursday and Friday games with Thanksgiving. And Georgia Tech, I don't know that we can give them too much credit for this one. Georgia Tech, 8.47 million on a Friday night. And of course, 8 overtimes Tremendous football game. After that, not much. Clemson, South Carolina, 2.4 million at noon, ESPN. Miami, Syracuse, 2.1 million, ESPN. Florida, Florida State, ESPN 2, primetime, Florida, Florida State, 1.37 million. And that is it for the regular season. Championship weekend. I noted this on Tuesday. I think it's pretty important that there's a direct correlation here. Clemson, SMU, the ACC championship game, drawing just under 6 million views, just about 1 million views less as a tremendous game. That was a 17-point comeback by SMU in the fourth quarter to get to a final 56-yard field goal to win the game. Did not stay with Arizona State and Iowa State that turned out to be a blowout in the third quarter. Not a good look for the ACC there. Other bowl games and playoff games. No, these are the largest audiences of the season. And this must be before the college football playoff. And the ACC is not going to show up forever in this. Look at this. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. Okay, the 17th highest rated game of the season involved an ACC team. Georgia Tech, Georgia, 8.5 million. Again, can we really give the ACC much credit for that? And then Clemson and Georgia down the list at 7.6 million on ABC. Bowl games. Clemson against Texas. That had the unfortunate situation of competing against the NFL and getting a bit trounced. Still 8.9 million people watched it. SMU and Penn State was the lowest rated playoff game at 6.6 million. And again, they had to compete against the NFL. Elsewhere in the ACC, Cal and UNLV at 1.48 million. And then there were other postseason games the next weekend. And this was the best showing by the ACC, period. Almost as good as the playoff game. About 2 million less. But still, considering the stakes, Miami and Iowa State at 6.79 million on ABC. There you see Boston College against Nebraska, 4.1 million. Georgia Tech, over 4 million on ESPN. So like I say it all the time, when these bowl games are discounted and discarded, that more people are watching these teams during bowl play. Nobody watched Syracuse to the extent of almost 3 million viewers until they played a bowl game against Washington State on Fox. Pitt and Toledo, 2.5 million ESPN game. And NC State and East Carolina, they were under 1 million on the Military Bowl. And that is it for the ACC. And I kept Troy's comment up that entire time. Why? On the Moves, our recruiting and transfer portal show with Leanne Herring every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time on our recruiting channel. Please check it out. It's a good time. In the chat, anyone in the chat? Okay. We close with a call. And the deal every week is we push into bonus time with $100 in super chats and other contributions. Somebody calling me right now who should know that I'm actually tied up and I'm on the air, but they should know my schedule. All right, folks, going once, going twice, and going 3 times on the call-in portion of this. As I text this individual and let them know, hey, I'm live. All right. Any callers, folks? Good to see everyone. Chris, Mike's with us, and others. Mike and Mike. Doug Flutie threw the greatest pass ever? Really? Did he? Okay. All right. We got our caller, and it's our buddy Chris. Hello, Chris. How you doing?
Good. Can you hear me?
I can. What's going on today?
Oh, not a whole lot. Just enjoying the afternoon.
Enjoying the
Resting, I
afternoon.
guess.
Well, that's a good thing to do. Enjoy the afternoon. I'm enjoying the conversation with everyone here. We just went through the ACC TV ratings for last
I
season.
haven't read your book. Did you say? I mean, I heard a few of them. Were you basically saying that they have a pretty good following? I couldn't quite. I didn't keep up with
Not
the
compared to the
conversation.
other
I'm sorry.
conferences, no. Depending on what your standard is, yeah,
do
when
you
a
ever go
million
through?
people watch a football game, that's a lot of people. I'd like to have a million people watch me. So that's not bad, although they've got a few
Yeah,
more
I guess that.
resources tied up into it than I do. But compared to the Big Ten and the SEC, no. It would be an interesting take to match up the Big 12 against the ACC, but just because of the presence of Deion Sanders, the Big 12 outdrew the ACC.
I guess I didn't watch the game, to be honest with you. I guess the game between.
Hello, Chris. We may have lost
Yes.
Chris.
Are you there?
I'm here. Are you here? Hey, Chris,
Hello?
you with us? Hello, Chris.
Yes.
Yes. I think we're
Yes.
losing you.
Yes. Well, I'm trying to reach you. I have a problem with my phone.
Okay, we'll give it one more shot. So
I can't
again,
reach you.
what's on your mind? Okay, I think we're having an issue with Chris, and therefore we will ask him to call back another time. So if anyone else would like to call, we'll go going once, going twice, going 3 times. Next show for the Voice of College Football would be, for me personally, the Miami shows at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Other than that, I don't have the schedule in front of me. My apologies. We've got shows all over the place. The Clemson shows tonight. I know that at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And again, yours truly and Cam Underwood State of the U on the Miami show at 7 Eastern. And every day, folks, we need to make this an appointment every day with you because great guests, yes, they're coming. Great guests, conversations with you, call-in lines, all of it, the news of the day, big topic of the day, which this week we're going through the TV ratings, the ACC today, the Big 12 yesterday, upcoming the SEC on Thursday. We'll see. We'll give Chris another shot. He snuck in under the wire. Chris.
Yes.
Sounds like we've got you.
I don't know. My telephone's terrible. I don't know what the reason. I need to get a new phone. So I apologize. I apologize to you. It's
Oh,
not your fault.
don't apologize. It's not your
So,
fault either.
well, it's not your fault. Mike Rotunda, I don't know. I mean, all these people have all their opinions. Is there a way to get the opinion out of everything, Mark? I mean, even not your opinion necessarily, but there's a way I think to kind of scrape through and get down to brass tacks with all this stuff in some ways, I think.
What's wrong with what Mike has to say? What did he say?
Nothing. He just said I was wrong, which he has a right to his opinion, but I'm not trying to promote anything other than
Are we
just
talking
saying,
about his comment about the Doug Flutie pass?
yeah, a little bit.
Okay. I just personally think that's one of the most overrated plays in history. I'm not saying it's not a great play, but there are Hail Marys that are caught about almost every week of the college football season. I would say about every 3 or 4 weeks. Uh, Now, this one did not decide a championship. They were not, it was just basically, it was on CBS. It was the Friday after Thanksgiving. A huge crowd was watching the game, and it vaulted Doug Flutie to the Heisman Trophy. So I
Right.
understand those conditions, but in terms of just the play, plus it did not in any way affect a championship. But
Mhm.
it's good. It's a great play.
I think it might have.
It might have what?
I think it affected the championship.
It did not affect the championship. The
Um,
national championship.
well, not directly, maybe.
That's your year, Chris. You should be authoring a book on 1984.
I might have to do it at some point.
You should.
I don't want to be a competitor though to your business,
Well, there are other competitors already out there. So,
and I don't want to take money away from you.
well,
Not that I,
I appreciate that,
not that I
but
can. Not that I
I'll
can. My
I'll
guess
take
would
the
be to,
risk.
I think David was offering it as a joke, but collaboration, I don't. I think collaborations are good if they yield, meaningful results. I'm not suggesting we collaborate. I think you know a lot more than I'll ever hope to know, but I just think in terms of putting pieces together and coming to a decision that's, bias free maybe with anything is a good thing if you can do it. Now, people are always gonna. I fought this whole thing to death about really. People seem to think, oh, Chris, he's just trying to promote like a. Well, really, and this isn't to promote anything again, Mark. Um, in my opinion, you can pick almost any team you want, but at some point, and I'm not talking about you. I'm using you as a general,
Sure.
not as like not you, Mark Rogers. But at some point, I think people have to look at the numbers. Maybe I mean one thing I think, and this is just my opinion, Mark, and it's not really maybe even a popular opinion, but I think anytime a team like was it 2 years ago maybe when Florida State was 13-0, that was kind of
Yes.
strange because there was like I don't know, I don't think you necessarily felt this way. I don't know that I really did either, but I know Darrell the MVP was one that kind of thought that because and I'm having a blank on the quarterback, but because they weren't
Jordan
at
Travis.
well, I don't even know who it was, but anyway, because I don't
Jordan
really.
Travis.
Okay, Jordan. Okay, because he wasn't available, like that somehow makes it to where. I mean, there was a point, and again, I don't tie everything to 1984. The only reason I really do it, Mark, is just for perspective. It's not to. There was a point in the game between BYU and Michigan where Robbie Bosco was unavailable. I don't know that necessarily put BYU. Yeah, they weren't at, but they played. They probably wouldn't have won without Robbie Bosco. In all fairness, but because they didn't have him there, shouldn't necessarily affect the. People think, well, that matters because that means that they didn't have their best player, which is true. But they had a competent, Blaine Fowler. I don't know if you know much about him or not, but he contributed not just in that game. The opener against Pittsburgh, I think he actually played at least a. Well, he played a part in the result. I think he threw like as a. I'm not sure if he was substituted in, but anyway, he threw a pass that went for a substantial gain that I think helped BYU get some momentum going. And so it's like, a contributing member doesn't necessarily have to be on the field every play. I'm not sure exactly why people have to make it about one player. I mean, I understand why they do it. I mean, if you have one player that makes the difference, like who's that quarterback at Louisville that was so good? Without
Lamar
him,
Jackson.
yeah, without him, they're not the same team. I understand that, but I think there's something to be said for the way a team can adapt to, I guess, a missing player or or whether whether they're still as good. I guess you can always make the argument that they're not, but I think Robbie Bosco himself, I think he came in after Steve Young, and I'm not sure how good he was initially, but I don't understand why it's always about one player. I've never completely understood why that's so important. But again, I'm not an authority on the sport, so what I think probably isn't that important. It's just that I think a team is more, like they say, it's what is it? Is it equal to the sum of the parts or more? I don't know that it's more than the sum of the parts, but I think you kind of show what you're all about if you're not maybe at full strength. And I know, for example, Notre Dame, I guess, had an injured lineman against Indiana. I didn't know this until later, but so they were, I guess you could say they were shorthanded, but I don't really look at it that way because I figure, if they're as good as Notre Dame is, whoever they have coming in as a reserve is probably maybe not as good, but close to being as good as whoever it was that he's replacing. I don't know if you have the same opinion on that. Maybe you don't.
I don't have any issue with everything you've stated. I think that yeah, we unfortunately single out and glorify certain players and quarterbacks in particular, just because that's easier to do from a marketing standpoint. When you flip on a promo, if you're watching a game or watching television and you see a promo for Monday Night Football, yeah, they'll put both quarterbacks, unless there's somebody that's just outstanding on one of the teams, a wide receiver, and they're going to say Lamar Jackson and the Ravens take on Dak Prescott and the Cowboys.
Well, and I understand. I think there's a little bit of what do you call it? You understand this probably a lot better than I will ever. But to get that number one, I think to put yourself in that position, I think you really have to demonstrate that you deserve it. And then my guess would be, because I don't really keep up with it as closely as probably some other people like you do, but I don't know how quick they are to pull the guy out if he's not, for the next guy. I don't know how quick they do that, but I think once you lose that starting position, I think depending on the player, maybe, that's something that's hard to reclaim. I think after you lose it, I think that's maybe why there's so much pressure on the starter. Is I think that as soon as they start pulling you out, at that point, then it's kind of a way of saying we're not sure if we don't know if you're necessarily who we want, in that position. I don't know. I've never played quarterback. I think I tried once and I wasn't good enough, but my guess would be that they do everything they can to put the best player in every position. Probably. That makes sense to me anyway.
That is their job. All right, Chris, is there anything else you wanted to discuss?
Well, I've already said this, and I hope you don't get upset if I bring it up again, but with respect to 84, I count at least 7 teams, honestly, that maybe could have potentially been the team. I mean, I kind of don't like hearing that oh yeah, Chris, he wants it to be, I don't really want it to be anybody. I just want it to be the best team. And if it's Oklahoma or if it's, then fine, if that's who it is. He said it wasn't BYU, so I'm still waiting for him to tell me exactly who it is then if it wasn't. I know you said it was Washington.
No, I did not.
Well, it's okay if you do. I mean, I don't necessarily think that's a bad pick. I think that's probably as good a pick as any. What I tried to explain once, and I don't know if it makes sense or not, BYU and Iowa share a title. I mean, it's not because I say so. It's because they actually did what they had to do to both qualify. And
Iowa.
It's BYU, and and the reason why I've tried to explain this, and it's not necessarily crystal clear, but if you compare who Iowa tied was Wisconsin, and BYU actually beat Pittsburgh, but it was close enough to where it could have gone either way. I mean, that game is still kind of a disputed win. Anyway, you add those together, you get a 500 team, right? So collectively, they kind of share a common, even it's not direct, they share a common opponent in a way, even though they didn't play each other. And it basically balances out to where either team could have won. Yeah, I pick Iowa. I mean, I hope that doesn't upset people. It's not, I don't really have any ties to Iowa, and I don't.
What are you telling us when you tell us that BYU and Iowa rightfully shared the national championship in 1984? The Iowa team that went 8-4-1.
Yeah, they share a title. It's not, in other words, they kind of lean on each other. And I can explain it relatively simply, Mark. Florida shares a title the same season with LSU, and for the same reason, except
what year is that?
84. They share a title with because they tied. They played each
Wait a
other.
minute. We've got two different titles going on. We got the BYU Iowa title, and we've got the LSU Florida title.
No, there's more than two, but yeah, that's two of the four.
What are the names of these titles?
Well, the Florida championship was the New York Times, which in my opinion is the same as the one that I give, even though I don't work for the New York Times. So it'd actually be my title, really, Florida's. And you want to know who they share it with? Well, it's either LSU or themselves because they did the same thing the following year. And so you can pretty much put those two teams together and you can get one title out of two. So they actually claim a title consecutive years. Florida does 84, 85. So that's a good pick. You can pick Florida and be okay. You can pick the reason you can pick Washington really is because Washington, in my opinion, they were good enough to beat BYU in '96. That's the only team BYU lost to in '96, by the way. And their record at 9-3, I think, actually is good enough to get them in the they're not a national champion at 9-3, but they beat BYU, and then they also beat BYU again the following year. And so that was after BYU beat Kansas State. So they actually kind of took whatever title away BYU had away from them. So you can include Washington. And then the other one that I didn't mention, USC in 78, they needed BYU. I'm sorry, not BYU. USC in 78 needed USC in 84 to complete their title. And I think UCLA actually, they needed a title. They actually claimed a belt in 84. They beat Miami, Florida. Miami, Florida was the champion from the previous season, and they went 8-5, and they got beat by UCLA in the Fiesta Bowl by 2 points. Anyway, that's a belt title. That's the one Florida won this year, by the way, was the belt.
Florida won the belt this year.
Yes, Florida.
Because Michigan. Did
Michigan
have the belt at the end of the previous season? Who had the belt?
They beat Washington. They were the belt champion. They got beat by who was it?
Texas.
Figured out.
Texas was the first loss.
Was it? Okay, and then Texas would have been beaten by, I think, was it Ole Miss? Anyway.
Oh, they lost to Georgia.
Oh, I'm sorry. And then Georgia, I think, got beat by Ole Miss, and then Ole Miss got beat by Florida. So.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to see Ole Miss play. I'm sorry, I want to see Florida play somebody good, but
very nice.
So yeah,
Florida's the belt champion right now. I was not aware.
Well, after beating Ole Miss, I think so. Yeah, they retain it. So and that's all I wanted to say. I'm not pressing the point. I'm just trying to make it clear to people that there's more ways. One way to skin a cat.
So you can have 5 lost national champions.
Well, I don't pick them, Mark. I mean, if you want to know the truth, I mean, you're making it like it's my choice. It's not really. I don't have a choice. You want to know why it's Iowa? Is that what you're asking me? Why it's Iowa?
I want to ask you that, but I know better than to ask you that.
No, go ahead, because they're the only team.
No, I know better than to ask you that.
They're the only team that makes it to where it's a fair shake. That's why.
I didn't even have to ask you that.
That's the only team that makes it fair. That's why. I mean, it's that simple.
What happens to Ohio State? They beat Iowa by 3 touchdowns.
Well, they lost to USC. I mean, I don't know. You think I should give them a title for losing? I mean,
well, should Iowa get a title for losing 4 times?
Well, they beat Texas. That's a whole nother. They beat Texas.
I'm sure it is. It always becomes another.
No, Mark, you're kind of trying to like make it like I don't know what I'm doing. I don't really appreciate that. I'm not.
Well, I don't know. No. You know what, Chris? Let me make a distinction there. I'm not trying to make it look like you don't know what you're doing.
I don't know. I just don't know what I'm doing.
Okay. I don't know what you're doing. That's the distinction. I'm being serious. I don't know what you're doing.
No, I saw that one.
I know you're tracking the belt title. This is what I know, that you track the belt title, that's great. It's meaningless, but it's great. It's a novelty. And then you also have your proficiency ratings every year that you tout, and that's fine as well.
Go watch BYU play. You'll see on there, it'll say NCAA. That's not something I'm giving them. The NCAA champions. The only problem with it is they should be given equal credit to Iowa. That's the only. I have a beef with it. It's not fair. It's not fair to Iowa. They have as much claim as it as BYU does.
They sure do. They lost 4 games. They should rightfully be the national champions.
No, that's you saying that. That's good for half a share. I mean,
We
it
could
just
bring
makes
you on our Iowa show on Tuesdays, and you could explain
no.
to our Iowa audience why they should be claiming a
Well,
1984 national championship at 8-4-1.
it's easy to explain, but I don't know that
Uh,
you want to.
no, you have explained it, Chris.
No, they beat
You have
number.
explained it. So I
Well,
appreciate the explanation. Certainly, you
you
were
start.
encouraged to call me anytime.
All right. All right. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Chris. Have a good night.
You too. Bye.
Thank you. All right. I was super patient today, wasn't I? All right. We do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. If you just checked in, watch the entire show, basically running through ACC TV ratings. If you don't want to do that, I totally get it. But you know what? We're going to trim up that portion and we'll release it first thing in the morning. I was going to start on the state of Voice of College football business, but Troy would get mad at me. So we don't want to do that. I don't want to air my grievances. Next show for me personally, again, Miami at 7 p.m. Eastern time. We got our Clemson show with Jordan and Tiger Paw at 8. Have a great day.